Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. My name is Sebastian Moore.
And I'm hilary.salt.
And today we're going to do something, I suppose, a little bit different because I'm not going to bring a news item particularly because I've got a lengthy culture club item.
Okay.
And we're actually going to have a special guest on to reinforce my culture club item.
Sounds intriguing.
And what are you going to talk about in the news?
I want to talk about AI and exams.
Okay, interesting.
Education more broadly as well.
Okay.
Perhaps. Yeah.
And anything particularly to discuss news-wise other than the items that we're bringing?
I think we talked last week, didn't we, about the new EU agreement, or pact, I think you said it was called, didn't you? And I know we were both at a Politics in Pubs meeting last night where I think their judgment was harsher than perhaps we'd finished on last week.
Well, and even you, I mean, when we were on our way there, you were saying how you're much more mad about it than you were last week, now that you've read more into it.
Yeah.
And actually at the Politics in Pubs event last night, I think one thing I've taken away from that is a continuing concern that we're speaking to people that are all on the same page about everything. So we're always in groups where we're likely to agree on things.
Yeah.
And I think that's always something that's a problem because it's natural for human beings to sort of gravitate towards people they agree with.
Yeah.
But Politics in Pubs is a group where it's a free speech group and there's really nothing, it's not partisan at all.
No.
So we should be encouraging people to come from whichever side of the political spectrum they're on. And yet in the room last night, everybody was against this deal. And I said, I'd love to hear a steel man from the other side of, why this is a good thing, because I'm sure that it's not been universally hated. You mentioned the polling on it. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the polling is quite interesting actually. So it's I think it's fairly neutral. So it said, I think it was a total of 46% of people either didn't know whether it was good or bad, or thought it was neither good or bad. Good nor bad. About 29% I think thought it was good or very good, and 26% thought it was bad or very bad. So I think that's fairly neutral. But I confess I'm quite sceptical about polling these days. I'm not sure whether what you get from those polling, taking the pulse of the nation exercises is actually a true representation of what people think. But maybe that's because I think everybody thinks like me, and maybe they don't.
Yeah, but if you do have an opinion about this deal that's positive, then do get in touch, because I'd love to hear a positive argument from the other side. I mentioned to you that I think on Question Time this week, BBC Question Time, it was generally a positive feel about the deal. I think the people that were there arguing that it wasn't a good deal were drowned out a little bit from the other side. So I say drowned out, I mean the tone of the argument, they were very much on the back foot, I felt.
That is the BBC, though.
It is the BBC, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did offer up one positive last night, which was pet passports.
Pet passports?
Yeah, so I think that's helpful.
So should we get on to talking about exams and AI?
Is that right? All right, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
So I think you probably know about this better than I do, but we are very much entering the period of exam panic, aren't we?
Yep.
By exams, I perhaps don't just mean where you go into a room and do an exam, but more assessments, people having to hand assessments in, all those kind of things. So I think it is something that lots of people are talking about. And the General Centre for Assessment, something like that, one of the bodies that is a regulator for all of the different exam boards, has issued some guidance at the end of last month, which was quite heavily AI featured quite heavily in it. So obviously people are worrying about how AI affects exams. I should also probably express an interest in that I'm on the Council of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. We are an examining body and we are concerned about AI in exams. This year we went back to examination rooms for exams. They've previously been done online wherever people wanted to do them. So that's an indication, I think, from our point of view about how concerned we are about some of the ways in which people are perhaps using AI.
I presume that the actuary exams aren't just sort of binary answers that are easy to Google.
No, but they are. There are ways in which you can use some of the more sophisticated AI.
Yeah, so it's something that wouldn't have been cheatable with search engines, but is cheatable with LLMs.
Correct.
Right?
That's
large
right.
language models.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it is an issue. And in some ways, I kind of felt it took me back to when we first got calculators. Now, this probably feels very ancient to you, but when I was in secondary school, our maths teacher was probably the first person we ever knew who had a calculator, handheld calculator. And we didn't have them.
This big, was it?
It wasn't actually that big, but it was maybe A4 kind of sized. Yeah.
I was joking.
So it was a very, very new thing. And we certainly didn't use calculators in school or in exams. And there was very much a feeling that if you used a calculator, it would make you stupid because you'd forget how to do everything mental maths like. And I think now the idea that people would go into a maths exam without a calculator would perhaps be very odd for anybody to think about that. But that's definitely what we did. We just had pen and paper. But I think, I would argue quite strongly that the fact that people do have calculators does free them from some of that mental navying, mathematical navying, where our teacher would have called it at school, and allows you to do more sophisticated things. And I think we've also seen that development over the recent past with people using, word processing, Excel, Python, all those kind of things that people now routinely use as part of an exam, which, if you applied that idea that had been about when I was at school, that would make you stupid. I don't think it does make you stupid. It just makes you able to do more sophisticated things with numbers and words. But I think it does inevitably mean that there is a question about when is it okay to use the more sophisticated LLMs that we've got now, and when is it not? And this guidance that's been put out by the examination boards, it kind of focuses, I think correctly, on the idea that the work submitted must be the student's own work. And in some ways, if you think if somebody, put a question into AI and then cut and pasted that answer into their answer, then, clearly they shouldn't get marks for that. And there are, you probably know, there are quite a number of applications, software applications that allow people to kind of spot AI. Turnitin is one of the ones I know. They're not infallible, because I think if people are those kind of people who do rote learning, again, which I used to do, and then reproduce something from the textbook, it can catch those kind of things as well. So I don't think it's infallible.
Yeah, and I think there's a way of you can get an LLM to write something for you, and then you can sort of send it back into it and say, can you make this not sound like an LLM? Right?
It's clever, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think just a tip for people, the dash, which on a computer really is only a short dash, but do you know the difference between an M dash and an N dash?
No.
These just different lengths to do slightly different things in a grammatical context. And ChatGPT really likes the N dashes, which is the longer one, I believe. And so you'll notice if you ask ChatGPT certain questions, it'll always include those. So if you see somebody's email and it's got these long dashes in, it's almost definite that they've used ChatGPT.
In doing this research, I picked up on some other giveaways as well. The use of the Oxford comma.
See, yeah, but I use the Oxford comma.
You do, you love it, don't you?
I love the Oxford comma. Just to explain to the audience, if they're not aware, if you're writing a list, the last item in that list would be and something. So cheese, apples, and potatoes. Would you have a comma after apples? Cheese, apples, and potatoes?
I wouldn't.
And I would.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being is that often it can better infer what you mean. So the classic example is a sentence like, I would like to thank my parents Superman and Wonder Woman. If you use the Oxford comma, it's clear that you're referring to your parents, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Whereas if you don't use the Oxford comma, it sounds like you're saying, I'd like to thank my parents, who are Superman and Wonder Woman.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the reason I'd use it. That's my argument for using it.
I use it in some circumstances where I think it does help understanding. But
you're an occasional Oxford comma.
My default is to not use it.
Okay.
Some of the telltale signs are numbered lists followed by a colon.
Yep.
So a colon is apparently something that the AI programs quite often put in, where people perhaps generally don't use a colon. Using tautology.
Okay, a single bachelor.
A single bachelor, yeah.
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 You spot tautologies quite often, I think.
Yeah.
So tautology is when you say the same thing twice.
You don't need to say it, yeah, exactly. Yeah. A true fact.
Yes.
And there was another one I had in my head, I've just forgotten. Oh, yeah, however, comma, as the start of a sentence.
Oh, I like however, comma. Oh, no. Maybe I'm just a large language model.
Maybe
That's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is people... Why would we need to check? So this is if someone's submitted an assignment that they've done at home, or if they've done an exam where it wasn't in a classroom with an invigilator.
Yeah.
And you're checking to make sure it's theirs themselves.
Is it their work? So just in the same way that in the olden days, a teacher might get 2 lots of homework which were the same because somebody's copied somebody else's on the bus. That's what we used to do. Then, you would say that's not your homework. You don't get any marks for that. And in the same way, if you're copying what ChatGPT tells you, you shouldn't get any marks. But there are some much more, I think, nuanced situations. So there are some exams where people are allowed to take notes in. So one example that's given in this guidance is a student, on one question, their answer was suspect. And they, when questioned, said that they'd done all their notes for that subject, but they'd missed out this section. And so in a bit of a panic the night before, they'd asked ChatGPT to produce notes for them for that section. So they had used ChatGPT to produce the notes that then informed their answer in the examination. Now, what the example in that guidance says is that they shouldn't get any marks for that question because they have effectively used ChatGPT. But there are other situations where people were more careful about the conclusion they jumped to. So there's one example of a student who produced all their own work in their own language and then used one of the AI mechanisms to translate that into English. But it was one of the ones that actually enhance what you say. They don't just translate it. And it's an artsy kind of subject. And the adjudication of the examiners there was that they should have their mark reduced because it was partly produced by AI, even though there was a good chunk of their original work in there as well. But it had been enhanced as well as translated by AI. Which the interesting thing about that is that implies that if you just use a straight translation without AI, without the enhancements of AI, then that's perhaps okay.
Well, you could use Google Translate for something like that, and it's what I did in my studies at school. I would use Google Translate just because it was quicker. Often I'd write something, translate it, and then I could spot the mistakes. Because Google Translate, actually, this shows the evolution of technology. I remember my teachers saying, "Oh no, don't use it because it's so easy to spot the errors.
Yeah,
it's never going to be able to do what a human would be able to do." Mm-hmm. And sure enough, now when I use Google Translate, I look at it and think that's pretty good. Like it's very rare now that I can spot mistakes.
Yes, which kind of makes you think, well, would anybody go to university and study a foreign language when you don't really...
No, don't say that.
Okay.
Don't say that.
Well, that kind of does lead on to a kind of wider discussion about education as well as just exams, doesn't it? So there's a big article in the Sunday Times on Sunday kind of having a bit of an existential worry about this. So what should universities be doing about AI? And I say outside of just the context of examinations. So one approach might be we just ban AI and we teach in a traditional
Good
way.
luck.
Good luck. Yeah, good luck. But also, is that helpful to students who are then going to go into a workplace that perhaps does use AI quite heavily? And we use AI quite a bit here, don't we?
Do we?
When we get
Yeah,
stuck
I
with
suppose, troubleshooting for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
how to change an American date into
just now
English
on
date.
Excel. In fact, I would say this is one of the. I've really started to use it a lot more than I
Yeah.
did before, and I'm starting to understand where it's useful and where it's maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things it's really good for is troubleshooting problems,
Yeah.
technological problems, because often in the past you'd have needed somebody to have previously had that problem and
Yeah.
asked about it on a forum.
Yes.
Whereas now it can piece together things from different, let's say, manuals or forums, and it can piece all of those things together. And usually it's pretty accurate. I mean, even if it makes a mistake, it's not the end of the world because you can test it and trial it. So it's one of the best uses, I think.
Yeah. We did get there in the end, didn't we?
We did,
Bit of teamwork on that.
Yeah.
So, is it sensible for a university to ban AI? Probably not. But again, I kind of go back to my use of the calculator example, because I think what universities should be doing is using AI to the extent that they can, but in a way that allows students to be critical and to use it in a way that... So the thing with the calculator was that you could add up 57 numbers and you'd get an answer and you'd think that's the right answer. But, people with a kind of mathematical brain who had a bit of mental maths would know that was not the right answer, even though that's what the calculator said. And, you'd probably put in a number incorrectly.
I did -10 squared on the calculator in a lesson recently because I teach maths as private tuition. -10 squared is what?
Plus 100.
Yeah, that's two negative numbers times together a positive number. And this particular calculator was saying a -100.
Was
And I
it?
was trying to prove to my student that if you square a negative number, it will always be positive. And the calculator, I had to say, no, the calculator's lying. Believe me.
Yeah. And did you show them how to write boobies with the calculator turned upside down? No?
I remember doing that in school. I think nowadays the displays, they're no longer that 7. I can't think what you call it, 7-line display.
Right, okay, yeah.
Displays you probably wouldn't be able to nowadays.
Oh dear. Oh, well.
They ruin everything.
They do. So
go on, yeah.
Getting back to what should universities be doing? Teaching critically in a way that allows you to use AI, but to know when it's wrong in the way that you just suggested with Google Translate. It feels to me that's the way they've got to go. But one of the issues, I think, when you read around this is that because universities are perhaps doing things that are inconsistent, students feel very disorientated by it. So, one student might have done, for example, a line-by-line actual translation, and somebody else might have used ChatGPT and the other person got a higher mark than them. And that feels unfair, doesn't it? Although, I would say that the person who actually did the line-by-line translation probably learned a lot more and added to their toolkit of ways in which they can spot when ChatGPT is wrong. So I think that does have to be some careful thought about what are the rules, and you need to make those rules clear to students so that they don't feel that they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. But there must be ways in which universities can start to think about what's the best way we can use AI that does push people on. So, as with the calculator, you can do more complex sums, but you still are applying your own analytical and critical skills to it. And I'm not saying that's easy, but it feels to me that that's what universities need to spend some time thinking about.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. And I think this mirrors a lot of the technological changes that we've had over time. I mean, a classic example is I remember learning to write properly, and I was very slow at writing, and I had to do line after line after line. And I would think to myself, but who writes nowadays? Everybody started to use computers.
Yeah.
This is, 15, 20 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we very rarely write. But I still want to be able to write because I might need to write a Christmas card or something, fill in a form, whatever. So I think that with any technological change, we have to accept that the world is going to be different than it is now.
Yeah.
And we have to try and anticipate that as much as possible, but also try and mirror real life whenever we can. Because for AI, for example, it would be ridiculous to say never use AI in schools or in universities, because you're just not preparing students for the life that they're going to have when they leave.
And they would anyway.
And they would anyway. On the flip side, it would be ridiculous to say, let's only use AI, because you're not preparing students for the possibility that the AI is that you're in a situation where you don't have access to it, or the internet goes down and you're trying to fix the internet, but you haven't.
Yeah.
You know, any situation like that. I mean, just on this particular example of ChatGPT and large language models, quite often it is time consuming to use them.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got the answer, I'd much prefer to have somebody next to me, because human beings are really good at understanding what the issue is and trying to get a fast, like a shortcut to the answer, rather than having to go through the laborious task of explaining every detail.
Yes.
So we should still be, in universities and in schools, I think we should be encouraging students to use it and teaching them how to use it, whilst also teaching them not to use it, or teaching them for the situation when they don't have access to it. In the same way that we have nowadays on the maths, my students are currently sitting their maths exams, and they all have 2 calculator exams and 1 non-calculator exam.
Okay.
And I think that was different when I was in school. I think there was only 1 calculator exam and 2 non-calculators. So you can see how it changed.
Yeah.
So they're now giving more weight to the calculator exams, because they know that most of the time you have access to a calculator on your phone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of thing we have to get to grips with. And I think education environments are quite slow to get to grips with technological change.
And those maths exams, they don't get Excel or anything. They don't use spreadsheets. It's still only a calculator.
Yeah.
See, that surprises me. I would have thought maybe that I'd moved on.
I'd love to have done more work on Excel, because it's something I'll have to learn in adulthood. And it's...
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that guidance issued by the examination body, one of the things they said was that there are examples of the right use of AI, I want to put it that way. So
I thought you were going to say the right as in the far right.
No.
The far right use of AI.
No. They were suggesting that, you know, if you used AI to help you write an essay, for example, you should reference that. And the problem is that if you, as I understand it, you might correct me here, but if I put a question into AI, just the same way as I put a search into my search engine, what I get out will be different to what you get, because AI knows what you're interested in versus what I'm interested in. So the guidance said that you should say that you've used whatever AI engine you've used, and you should provide a printout of the screen, and then use that to quote what AI is telling you. And then potentially to critique it, you know, but just in the same way that in the traditional way of study, you might read a book and you might want to pull out a quote from that book and put that into your essay and put a little end note to say this is where you've got it from. But it is a lot more difficult when, with a book, the printed book's the same for everybody, isn't it? Whereas with AI or even search engines, the answer is different for different people. And in the same way, the search engine, if a page is updated, you know, it might take you to the same page, but it actually is a different page. So that need to document where your sources are and what you're using is even more important with AI than other forms of reference. So this guidance is saying that there are cases where the use of AI could be an absolutely legitimate thing for a student to do, but they need to be doing it in a way that the examiner is still confident that overall the work is the student's own. So it's back to that initial principle that I said, you know, that the work must be the student's own work. But it's shades of grey, isn't it? It's not very clear.
But I think if you're examining students and you want limitations as to the tools that they can use, whether that be asking somebody for help, asking a search engine for help, or a large language model, or a calculator, then you have to examine them in a controlled environment. I think it just is as simple as that. And I think it would be absurd to the students that are currently doing their maths GCSEs. It would be absurd to say, do it at home, we'll trust you, because why would anybody not Google the answers? And I think, and there might be limitations on that, but I think that's one of the requirements, that if you want to limit what tools students have access to, then you have to examine them in a controlled environment.
Interestingly, the Chinese government is experimenting with the use of AI to invigilate exams. So the big Chinese exam that's used to drive university entry? I'm going to have a stab at what it's called, but I might not get this wrong. I think it's called the Gaokao.
Gaokao. Okay.
And this is the same exam that students sit across China. And they, as I understand, it's done on a computer. But the authorities are using AI to identify cheating, even if that's cheating like copying somebody else's work or passing a note. And they're using AI to kind of look at all the individual students and to identify anything that they're doing that might suggest that they are cheating.
Yeah. And then that becomes a controlled environment. You're using the AI itself to what's the word? Police it.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That would include those old-fashioned ways of cheating, like writing it on your shirt collar, writing the answers on your shirt collar. Did you ever do that?
No, of course not. No. I do think, though, that we shouldn't, I think governments need to learn this, and I think schools and universities need to learn it as well, is that they are not going to be able to keep up with the technological changes themselves.
Correct.
In order to know how to teach it perfectly.
Yeah.
And I think you have to sort of relinquish a bit of control, give creative freedom to the students to see what they can come up with, because students will be far ahead of the teachers in this regard.
Yeah.
And play with it a little bit and see where it goes, and be a little bit more adventurous.
Is there a bit of a class issue here as well, though? Because the paid versions of AI are better than the non-paid versions, aren't they?
I'm not sure. I never pay for anything, like
I know.
or any of these any of these premium versions. I think I'll just use the free version. It differs from platform to platform, but I think ChatGPT, you get a certain amount of use before it then says, okay, we've dropped you down to the standard version. If you want to continue using the premium version, you have to pay for it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know what sort of percentage of people even pay for these things. So
I don't know either. It'd be an interesting question. And I think that's probably about all I've got to say anyway. Hope that's
a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's going to constantly be coming up again and again and again in conversation and in political discourse. Certainly in regards to automation, I remember it being talked about 7 or 8 years ago about the computers and robots will be taking over people's jobs.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why are the politicians not talking about this? And it's taken them 7 or 8 years to start having these conversations. So
that's right.
Politics is always sort of a little bit slow to catch up.
It is.
Good stuff.
Just one thought.
Yeah.
Just in case anybody thought I was saying this, I should say that Sebastian did buy me half a lager in the pub last night at Politics in Pubs.
Half a lager.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few more to buy you to catch up. Culture Club. So, I was in Norway last weekend.
Yes, I know that.
And
you didn't use the e-gates.
I didn't use the e-gates, no. I'm not sure anybody did. I'm trying to think. They did open up the EU queue after all of the EU people had gone through it, interestingly. So I used the EU queue.
Okay.
It also annoyed me. This is a very small point. This just shows my my pedantry, perhaps. But the queue, they had about 3 people trying to manage the queue. And there was a large way to walk. There was a long way to walk between the front of the queue and where you actually had to scan your passport or show the passport to the immigration officer. And I was getting annoyed because that walking time, which is about 10, 15 seconds, was happening for every single person. And I thought if I was managing this, I'd bring them in, be a bit more efficient. But anyway, Norway. So I arrived on the Friday evening with my brother, and we went out for dinner and spoke to the waitress and said, so is there anything you'd recommend that we do whilst we're here? We've never been to Norway before, never been to Oslo. What sort of things do you think we should see? And she said, but you have come for Constitution Day, right? We said, no, what's that? She said, it's the biggest day of the year tomorrow in Norway.
Blimey.
She said, so you won't be able to move around because there's going to be thousands and thousands of people in the streets in Oslo celebrating.
So it's like going to Paris on Bastille Day.
Exactly. And funnily enough, my brother Alex, who we've had on, he was accidentally in Paris on Bastille Day, I think last year or the year before.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it's the second time he's done this, where he turns up in a country unknowingly on the national day. And so on the Saturday, we went and we did a park run.
Well done.
Which you'll be happy with. And that was my 4th country doing a park run in.
Fabulous.
And Alex's 5th, I want to say. A bit of park run tourism. And what was great is it was a way of chatting to a couple of the locals about the day and what to expect and where to go.
Yeah.
And they all had these flags, these Norwegian flags. And I afterwards, with a few photos, after having done a few photos, I said, can I be cheeky and have one of these flags? And the race director was an English lady who's lived there for 15, 20 years with her husband and Norwegian husband and kids. And she said, I can't give you that because I don't know whose it is, but hold up, I'll go and grab my one. And she gives it to me and it's her son's. And she said he's had it since he was a kid.
Oh.
And it's got his name. She said, oh, sorry, it's got his name on it. And his name is Sebastian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I said, that's amazing. So she's given it to me, and it's muddy, the stick. She said it's been put in plant pots and flower beds and stuff. But that meant a lot, so I've got it hanging up in my flat. So we spent the day moving through the crowds and the parades. Hopefully, I've got a video, so hopefully I can overlay a video of me being very happy to be a part of the Norwegian celebrations. But let me just tell you a little bit about Constitution Day, it is celebrating the 17th of May, 1814, which was the day that Norway got its own constitution as a separate country from Denmark, to which it had been part of for a long time.
Okay.
And this constitution is the 3rd oldest written constitution in the world. And Norway actually had a period of where it was in a union with Sweden until the early 1900s. And interestingly, I like this detail that the victory in Europe, which was the 8th of May, and we've just passed it this year, 1945, obviously Norway was under Nazi occupation for most of the Second World War. But the victory in Europe was only, 9 days before Constitution Day. And so they actually now celebrate Liberation Day really as part of Constitution Day. So it's taken on this whole other meaning of independence. So it's got a lot behind it as a day. And anyway, I met a couple of Norwegians and was fascinated to ask them about what they were wearing and what they were doing. And one of them said that she'd be happy to come on the podcast and tell us a little bit about it.
How exciting.
So we will ask Stine about it in a second.
Great.
Okay, we are joined by Stine Nygaard. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are. Quite good, actually.
Stine very, very kindly has offered to come on and just talk a little bit about Constitution Day or kind of what you get up to. So like, what does the day look like for you?
For me, we typically get up quite early. Then we set up for breakfast, which is usually like a nice buffet of different spreads and bread. And usually we have the cake to end with. And usually we bake a pavlova. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Yes. Do you get the day off work? Is it a holiday?
Yeah, for sure. Everybody has a day off work. This is like the most day when everything is closed. You have a few restaurants that's open, but everything else is closed. So we usually then have breakfast, and during breakfast we sing these Norwegian National Day song. We sing our national anthem and other songs. And
just
then
with you and your friends?
Yes, just me and my friends.
I love that. I can't imagine a group of people here with their friends singing God Save the King.
No, we drink champagne or sparkling wine.
Oh, I can imagine us doing that.
Yeah,
that sounds
I can do
good.
that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice bit. And then at least my group of friends, then we go out into the city center just to like see what's going on. And there's different ways of doing this, but we usually play it by ear and then find a place to sit down to grab some more drinks and some food. And then usually we end the evening with a barbecue outside if it's nice weather.
And tell us a bit then, because the thing that really astonished me, and I think I'm still struggling to get over, is how dressed up everybody was. So I was in t-shirt and shorts because it was a lovely sunny day, as was my brother. And we're wandering around Oslo, and I wanted to apologise to people and say I'm really sorry for letting everybody down and being so underdressed, because everybody was in the most amazing attire, and some traditional, some more modern, but yours was very traditional.
Yes, I have the bunad, which is like the traditional outfit in Norway. So usually people get it around their confirmation when you're like 15. It's very normal to get it then. And I think over the last year, it's become more normal for guys to have it as well, but a lot of the girls definitely have it. Me, myself, I actually did not get a bunad until I was around 25, because when I did my confirmation, I did not want it for some reason. But then I spent some years abroad and I thought like, oh, this is just such a Norwegian thing to have that kind of speaks to my heritage, and it's just a nice thing to have. So now I love wearing my bunad. And I think May 17 is one of the few days when we actually wear it.
Now I do have a photo of you and Ole. Is it Ole?
Mhm.
Who,
Yeah.
when we're sitting in this sort of cafe restaurant in Drammen, which is just outside Oslo. Ole was shocked that we'd come to Drammen. He couldn't understand it. He's like, "Why have you come here?" And I said, "I'd like to get out of the main city and sort of see something different." And he spoke to us and started chatting, and he invited us to join their table where they had champagne, and they offered us a glass of champagne. And I've got a photo of that, so I might put that up if you're okay with that, so people can see what you're wearing. And the bunad, and I know I'm pronouncing all of these things wrong, but the bunad is covered in jewelry, isn't it?
Yes. So it's a differs from all like the regions in Norway. So the colors and the silver or the jewelry on the bunad will vary based on your region from where your bunad is from. But usually consist of a vest and then a skirt is the bunad, and then you wear a shirt underneath, and then you have all this silver, like a silver in your with your collar and another. So it all depends on your bunad how much silver you have on your bunad.
And they're so expensive, right?
Yeah.
That people actually get them insured.
Yes, that's correct. It's been a few mornings when it's like 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm walking towards breakfast to set it up, and I suddenly walk through a bit of a shady neighborhood and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm walking in my bunad all by myself. There's no one here. I'm wearing so much money right now. It's,
And
it is always
we're talking like thousands of pounds worth.
Yes, I'm gonna see if like I think I cannot do the converse. Norwegian kroners, I would say 25 to 30,000 kroners. So
Which
maybe a
is
couple.
roughly £2,000. Yeah.
Yes, we think so. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Wow. So I was I was saying to Hilary that we did an event called Park Run in the morning. Which is a British thing, but it's spread to other countries, and it was amazing because we were told beforehand how to say like congratulations on your day or congratulations on this day. Gratulerer med dagen.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
correct.
right?
Yeah.
And so we were sort of saying it to people on the way around, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. Park Run.
Yeah, that's
Everybody's
always.
dressed in the most amazing attire. Now, something that I was amazed by is that it didn't feel like this was an exclusive thing, and I would say
No.
that my feeling towards the trip and towards visiting Norway for the first time was that I was a part of it. And I think often you go and visit a country and you feel like you're watching from the sidelines and you don't really get a sense necessarily of what it's like to live there. But partly for the kindness of you guys to welcome us and to invite us over, and the other people we were spoken to, I don't know, maybe 10 times on that day, but random people just asking us, what are you up to, and getting into these interesting conversations. And I felt a part of it, and I felt like it was a very inclusive event. I think the word inclusive has kind of veered off and means different things nowadays, but I mean it in the sense that everybody was welcome, and it felt very multi-ethnic as well. which something that was really impressive to me, that it seemed to what's the word, like coalesce people around a common shared festival. Is that something that you feel when you're celebrating the day?
Yeah, I feel like it's a very inclusive event. And also, to directly translate what we call it, it's a people party. It's a day for everybody. It's day when you just take to the streets, and it's very maybe not Norwegian, because Norwegians are maybe a bit more famous for being not that open to strangers or that talkative to strangers. But on this day, it's very much a party in the streets where, and it's also called sometimes Children's Day because it is a day for children. There's parades in the city for all the elementary schools for the children. And in Oslo, you can see the king and the queen standing on the palace balcony waving the whole day for all the elementary schools walking by. And it's just a day when everybody takes to the street and you talk to people. And especially with the bunad, it's so easy to talk to other people because you say, oh, where's your bunad from? And then also in the later years, it's become a lot more normal to make, a lot of other people are making their own festive costumes to kind of represent, to merge the Norwegian culture and their own culture to be part of the day, which is quite nice.
That's what you should have done, Sebastian. You should have made some efforts beforehand. Really.
Definitely.
Is-
Well,
can
next
I ask-
time I'll be ready.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So, is there? So, Christmas here, for example, we have a very traditional dinner of turkey and sprouts and stuffing. Is there special things that you eat on your special day?
It's the breakfast, I guess, that's quite similar for everybody. You have usually freshly baked bread or rolls, and then you have different kinds of cheese and hams, and usually scrambled eggs or egg salad. You do this shrimp salad, and some vegetables, melons.
That's
Yeah,
a big breakfast.
Yeah.
I had a cinnamon bun of sorts. I don't know what you'd call it, Stine, but after Park Run, went to the cafe with everybody. I had this amazing cinnamon bun. Is that quite Norwegian?
Yeah, we love a cinnamon bun. We also have a cinnamon bun day. That's in September, I think it
Cinnamon
is.
bun
Yes.
day. Right, I'm coming for that.
Yeah, it's a great day.
So I feel like there's a lot to learn from Norway, not just politically, and we're social democrats, so I think we look to Scandinavian countries for, the public services, and it feels like you go there and you feel like you're actually in a functioning country. But I think we also have something to learn culturally. And I was saying to somebody recently that the last sort of positive feeling in the UK where we all felt like one people celebrating something was probably London Olympics. I remember that was a real unifier of sorts. And we've talked about needing some sort of celebratory day. It probably couldn't be St. George's Day, which is our sort of national saint day. It would probably have to be something else. So we're going to have to brainstorm and come up with something and encourage English people to have a celebration like this.
A special day, because the problem with St. George's Day, which is the English national day, is that it isn't the national day for Scotland or Wales or North of Ireland. So
we don't actually have a national day for the whole of the UK.
we don't.
No.
So what did you do for is it called the Jubilee, or what is it called?
The Jubilee, I suppose, is something, but then there's a lot of Republican sentiment in the country, so that kind of causes a bit of angst where people don't want to celebrate a monarchist thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, we'll have to come up with something. But
Definitely.
You've inspired me, Stine.
I'm glad you're here. And you're welcome next year as well. We're happy to show you around in Drammen.
Amazing.
Superb. Well, it might not be next year if you're going for Cinnamon Bun Day.
Cinnamon bun day first.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cinnamon bun day comes first, yes.
Great. That was really, really interesting. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, comments, or anything you want to say about the show, if you disagree with us, do send us an email. Our email addresses are in the show notes.
And do all those things like follow, subscribe, recommend us to your friends. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening. Perfect.